And with court proceedings wrapping up for the day, now Bradley Manning waits. His fate is about to shift into the hands of Judge Lind. She alone has the power to declare Bradley Manning a whistleblower hero or an American traitor. But this case is bigger than one Army private first class turned whistleblower. It could set the precedent for future cases to come. For more, I'm joined now by Elizabeth Goitein. She's the co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center. And you've been following this case closely. So in your opinion, how is it stacking up?
I think the prosecution has really struggled to establish that Bradley Manning knowingly was transmitting this information to the enemy, which is the major charge against him. That said, Judge Lind just recently ruled that that there was some evidence that could actually sustain that charge. She refused to dismiss the charge. So my assessment of the government's evidence may be a little different than the judge's on this point.
Sure, and when she did refuse to dismiss that charge, obviously the burden of proof was much lower than it is right now.
That's
but
right.
They still have that burden of proof. Now, what about predictions for the outcome? Do you have any?
Well, the one thing I can say is that Bradley Manning has already pled guilty to a lesser version of some of the charges that were brought against him through a very strange procedure that enables him to basically rewrite the charges against him and then plead guilty. And that plea stands no matter what the government does. So one way or another, he will be found guilty and sentenced on some of these charges, which include versions of the Espionage Act charges against him. And I suspect he'll probably be found guilty on some other charges as well.
So probably going to jail. The question now is for definitely how much time. Now, what would you say to people that call Bradley Manning a traitor?
I would say that we've now had a trial. We've had evidence put together, and that the government presented no evidence that he affirmatively intended to harm the United States, which is what a traitor is. I mean, he's not legally accused of being a traitor. That word does not appear in any of the statutes against him. But I think we all understand that term to mean somebody who's an enemy of the state and sets out to harm the country. There's been no evidence of that. You mentioned earlier, is he a traitor or is he a hero? He doesn't have to be either. I mean, there's a lot in between traitor and hero. And I think we've gotten a fairly complex picture of this person that's emerged through the trial.
Now, one of the people that was actually a witness for this was Colonel Morris Davis. He was an expert witness. And when he came into the studio after he testified, he said that he believes that this is a case of over-prosecution. I understand that you think that that's a case of over-classification. Can you talk about that a little bit?
They're related. I mean, one thing that this case has demonstrated is that the government keeps secrets that it shouldn't be keeping in a million years and does so frequently. The charges that the government brought against Manning addressed only a subset, a tiny subset of the information that he allegedly disclosed, because so much of the information is quite obviously not sensitive and didn't cause any harm. And we just don't have a good system in place for dealing with people who leak classified information when that information was improperly classified in the first place. And what we have instead is over-prosecution.
So what kind of a precedent do you think that this trial sets? I've asked this question time and time again, and I'm just very interested to get every single different person's perspective, because obviously he's being tried in a military tribunal, not a civilian court, but it could set a precedent, could it not?
It could. I mean, the charges against him include charges that are civilian charges that can be brought against civilians, and that includes the Espionage Act charges. There have been Espionage Act charges brought against other people, and those defendants have in some instances pled guilty, so there have been convictions. That's the equivalent of a conviction. This would be the first time under this administration and really recently that a judge or a jury, in this case a judge, has actually upheld a conviction, if there were a conviction, obviously, has upheld a conviction on Espionage Act charges for this kind of leak, a leak that in fact was not motivated by an intent to harm the United States. So that right there would be a precedent that we would need to really take note of.
It's very interesting. And, something else that Colonel Morris Davis said was that this trial could go on for years and years, depending on what the outcome is. Either the prosecution can appeal or the defense can appeal. But either way, it could end up in the Supreme Court, although they really don't take these military tribunal cases very often. I appreciate you coming in and weighing in on this. Elizabeth Goitein, co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center.
Thank you.